We have some breaking news. The Toronto Maple Leafs have just absolutely robbed the San Jose Sharks. And what is a very surprising trade that came out of nowhere, Brad Treliving has striked again, acquiring an actual useful piece for Ryan Reeves. We're going to dive into exactly who that is and discuss what this means going forward, as this is the beginning of something huge and more big things are on the horizon here for Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage, you aren't subscribed to the channel, you guys have been absolute beasts with the support. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys again for your continued support over here. Darius, out of nowhere, just completely out of nowhere, everything was quiet. We know big trades are going to happen, and this isn't the big trade of the offseason, but it is one that I will welcome with open arms, because Brad Treliving has pulled off yet another, on the surface, absolute robbery of a trade, as Henry Thrun, I believe that's how you pronounce it, it's a pretty instant reaction here, has been acquired from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Ryan Reeves. A 1-for-1 trade, and you're reading that right. A, you got a player back, the Leafs, for Ryan Reeves, and B, he's a 24-year-old defenseman with upside. And we're going to dive into the player, everything like that. They now have 7 defensemen. He played for the Sharks last year. There's a ton of things to go over, but Darius, unexpected, late at night on a random Thursday in the middle of the summer, Brad Treliving is working behind the scenes and got rid of a player who wasn't going to play anyway next year in exchange for someone who might play the Philip Meyer role.
Normally, these random news dumps come Fridays at 5 p.m. So I'm welcoming this on a random Thursday night. Big trade, and Chef Brad is cooking. Again, Brad Treliving doesn't have to retain any salary. We knew that he had to shed some salary. We were saying that it was probably the other two that were going to go first, David Camp, Calle Yarncroke, but it is actually Ryan Reeves that he offloads first. And this is a weird one for the San Jose Sharks, because you're taking on Ryan Reeves, who I guess could play on your fourth line. They're not expected to be that good of a team again next year, and they're obviously in the middle of a rebuild, but you get an actual useful player back that at very worst is going to be a really good AHL defenseman. Like, this guy's been playing NHL games for the last couple of years. He's been in the NHL with the San Jose Sharks. So again, at very worst with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, he's going to be a decent AHL defenseman. Like, I don't know how you could ever spin this as a loss for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You shed the salary of Ryan Reeves, who we knew, his time was coming to an end in Toronto, already really had before this trade, because obviously he was put on waivers at the trade deadline. So again, and this is not to dump on Ryan Reeves. He served his purpose. He came in, had some electric moments for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was great as a Maple Leaf, enjoyed watching him, but now moves on to the San Jose Sharks. But Thrun, like you said, coming over, this guy has the potential to be pretty electric. This is a guy who said he wants to be a number 1 defenseman in this league. He's still relatively young, and the one thing that I think a lot of people are really mulling over right now, or not really speaking about right now, since of course the trade just went through and just happened, this is a guy with the Leafs development staff at only 24 years old, can actually become a pretty steady, sturdy NHL defenseman with the Toronto Maple Leafs, because again, he has tons of NHL experience already. He's played the last 2 seasons in the NHL. So I think this is actually very exciting for the Leafs.
Yeah, you look at some of the advanced analytics, you can see Henry Thrun acquired by the Leafs. He's a young left defenseman who struggled on a bad team, forced to play big minutes in 2023-2024 for San Jose. He looked better offensively and defensively this season in a more sheltered role. I mean, I can't believe we got a player back for Ryan Reeves, let alone, someone that's actually interesting, right? Sharks pick up an old enforcer who is an NHL caliber in Ryan Reeves. Leafs pick up a young defenseman who is an NHL caliber in Henry. Both of these guys hurt their teams last season, but at least Henry Thrun can be buried and possibly developed. So that's the big thing here. But of course, something else to mention, like you mentioned, is the salary. And let's dive into the player himself. Now, of course, if you're unfamiliar with him, I assume, some people might be, some people, might not be. 24 years old. He's 6'2", 12 points in 60 games, which ironically enough is actually, pretty decent for his age. Again, points don't really matter as a defenseman, but again, the advanced analytics, they aren't great for this guy, but I did not like when I saw Ryan Reeves trade notification come through and everyone started talking about it. My friends in the group chat said that Ryan Reeves got traded. I was expecting for like a conditional 8th or something like that. Something that's ridiculous. To get back an actual player here, you can see here, it is a fleece. 24 years old, a defenseman, $1 million AAV, you shed salary, and worst case for Henry, he doesn't play. But there's also a very good chance that he does play this year. Does this mean that a move is coming for among the NHL defensemen right now? Maybe. I don't think he's that type of player, but it's very interesting. If anything, I think more moves are coming in the form of David Kemp and, of course, Calle Yarncroke.
Definitely. And I mean, you're shedding a little bit of salary and making this move. You are taking on salary. Of course, you could have traded Ryan Reeves for a conditional, 7th round pick, or like you said, an 8th round pick, like a pick that doesn't even exist, right? You could have just fired him into the sun if you really wanted to this summer, try to make it work to bring on no salary. But there's actually some upside here with, acquiring this player back. So, like I mentioned, he has experience. And like you just brought up his stats at the NHL level, he's played the last couple of years at the NHL level. He has 12 points in 60 games last year. Nothing crazy. He's a big defenseman, though. And I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to say, hey, come in here. You're not going to be an NHL defenseman on this team. There's no way. The defense is solidified heading into next year. But come on into the organization. You could play with the AHL squad with the Marlies next year, and you can, work with their development staff. And maybe at some point, a couple of years from now, you will be a steady NHL defenseman, because I feel like he has been, by everything, we've seen so far tonight, has been thrown to the wolves, has been thrown into the fire with the San Jose Sharks organization. And you can look at his stats and be like, man, he only has 12 points in those 60 games, or, he's not producing, or, all of these advanced analytics, like a lot of people are saying, his stats and advanced numbers don't jump off the page at you. That is all true, but look where he's playing, and he's kind of been thrown into the fire, right? So you have to understand that. So he's going to be able to come over here with the Toronto Maple Leafs now, develop properly. They're going to take their time with him, and he's still relatively young, right? Like, we see a lot of guys really just figure out. Look at a guy like Dylan Strome in the league, only really figured it out around 28 years old, right? And now he's super effective and a great first line center. So I'm not saying that, this guy's going to turn into a number one pairing defenseman, but that's his goals. He's literally said that he wants to be that in this league. And, maybe it doesn't end up like that, but maybe he's a great top 6, top 4 guy, right? It could be an interesting move here for the Leafs. And again, they're getting some, help here on the back end for the Marlies too, with some upside down the road for a guy that you knew they were going to move off of anyway.
Yeah. Worst case, he ends up being, nothing, doesn't produce much at the NHL level, and you gave up a 30 whatever year old Ryan Reeves. Best case, he ends up being somebody who contributes beyond, of course, the current defensive core. They have him under control for 2 to 3 years. They're aging, though. Chris Tanev, OEL, Jake McCabe's not getting any younger. Like Brandon Carlo, he's not old or anything like that. But I mean, he's a young defenseman with some upside. Of course, Morgan Riley's certainly not getting any younger. I absolutely love it. You can see this here. He was a good college player, solid puck-moving defender, can block shots and get in the way. Offensive output never really blossomed in San Jose. Probably more of an AHLer in Toronto. Worthy trade for Toronto, though. And a lot of San Jose fans are saying, why do this deal? All these different things. I guess, for the salary floor for, San Jose, it helps them there. I guess it also helps with potentially having an enforcer around those young guys. I guess that's probably their mindset behind it. But giving up for, getting Ryan Reeves and giving up young defensemen, very interesting. And there were some things here from Kevin. He was calling it back before he was even really rumored. So shout out to him. He said, doesn't look great by charts. He's only 24 and hasn't played for a good team. Talking about a Robertson swap. If you're getting this for Ryan Reeves, I'm very curious what Brad Treliving's going to pull off now. They got Michelli and they got a young defenseman for the equivalent of a 3rd-round pick in Ryan Reeves. Couldn't have asked for any better. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, again, Thrun, everything about him. I mean, great potential there. Really great potential. Again, does he end up being an NHL defenseman? He's been that, right? But I don't think he's with that. He's that with the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, but he has quite literally been that. So great move for Brad Treliving. I think that's the overarching theme of this right now, that Brad Treliving continues to cook. He's offloading salary. He has big plans heading into August, and he's trying to do these. I'm sure this wasn't an easy move to make. I don't know many teams could take on Ryan Reeves. It does kind of make sense. You touched on it too before we wrap up, that, it does kind of make sense for San Jose. Ryan Reeves is a guy that, he was on a podcast the other day and he's talking about all these stories with Artemi Panarin. Like, he's a fun guy, he's loose in the dressing room, all these things. So he would be good for that group. And obviously an enforcer, he's going to protect those guys, the younger core group of players that they have in San Jose. So makes some sense in that regard. But I think the Leafs definitely won this trade. They got younger, they got better, freed up some salary cap space, and there are more moves coming, and we're going to cover that in another video.
Yeah, and they also, which is interesting now, makes the Michael Pezzetta signing actually make a lot more sense, because they knew the writing was on the wall for Ryan Reeves, providing some of that physicality at a cheaper cost, almost half. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are. See you guys later.